Now, good afternoon, everyone. We're hoping for a lot of people to attend today's session on the MSCA Postdoctoral Fellowship Call 2022. So it's raining outside, so I hope that doesn't mean people are stuck in traffic now that we can move outside again. So let's just wait a few seconds for everybody to settle in and join us for today's Euraccess ASEAN information session on this very prestigious postdoctoral fellowship call, an opportunity for you to do 2 years of postdoc research on a topic of your choice in Europe. We have 3 speakers lined up today, and they will share with us information on the call itself. What are the modalities? What are the eligibility criteria? We'll get some inside information on how you can draft a strong proposal. And we're also joined today by a current fellow, Jia Hoong, who is in the UK at Reading University, and he will share with us a little bit about his own advice or experience on how to go about applying for the fellowship. Now, I think people are slowly coming in. It is now 3 minutes past 4 o'clock here in Singapore and also in Kuala Lumpur. And allow me to start by introducing the speakers of today. As I said, we're talking about the MSCA Postdoctoral Fellowship call today. The 2022 call has just opened a couple of days ago on the 12th of May, and it has a deadline of the 14th of September. And we're extremely pleased to have with us 3 speakers. They're all more or less connected to the UK. Our first speaker is Anne Nierobisch. Anne Nierobisch is a European advisor at the UK Research Office. She's based in Brussels, and she's one of 2 UK national contact points for the Marie Skłodowska Curie Actions. That means she's one of those people that are dedicating a lot of her time to advising researchers that are applying to the call on how to go about drafting a strong proposal, also checking whether you're complying with the formal eligibility criteria. She holds an MRES in chemistry and in statistics from Oxford University. And she has also worked at the early life cohort feasibility study at the Economic and Research Council before she joined the UKRO team in 2021. Our second speaker is Dr. Brian Cahill. He is based in Germany. He works at the Leibniz Information Center for Science and Technology as a grant manager of the cost action on research and mental health, which is an incredibly important issue. And I think Brian is just about to organize a very big conference on that issue. He is a member of the governing board of Euroscience, the European Open Science Forum, by the way, happening in July. You should all participate. And he is the previous chair of the Marie Curie Alumni Association. He himself has a vast experience in evaluating proposals. So he is a fantastic speaker to give us some advice on how to make your proposal very strong. And I said our final speaker is Dr. Ong Jia Hoong, who is a Marie Curie Research Fellow at the University of Reading in the UK, where he is engaged in experimental psychology. So very interesting crowd of people today. Now, without much further ado, or maybe I should just say a little bit about myself. My name is Susana, and I run the Euraccess ASEAN network. So we are an EU funded research project. Our mandate is to really keep you updated on the opportunities available to you for research opportunities and career development in Europe or with European partners. So enough about me. I'm now inviting Anne to share her screen and to start her presentation.
1 second, please, to get set up. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can. Thank you, Anne.
Okay. Thank you. So without much further ado, let me start. I'm going to introduce you to the Marie Skłodowska Curie Actions, to the postdoctoral fellowships. A few words about me. My name is, as Susana has kindly introduced me already, Nierobisch, and I'm a UK Marie national contact point and also a European advisor. And I'm working for the UK Research Office in Brussels. First, a few quick introduction to Marie Curie Postdoctoral Fellowship. So basically to Marie Curie itself, just that you get some background information and how the Marie Curie Postdoctoral Fellowship fits within the broader scheme of European funding. I also have a laser pointer. I brought a laser pointer with me. So the budget for the Marie Curie actions, just that you get an impression, is 6.6 billion over from 2021 to 27. And it forms part of Horizon Europe. So Horizon Europe is the European Union's flagship for research and innovation. So basically, in case you're ever wondering, Horizon Europe, Marie Curie, how do they fit together? Marie Curie forms part of Horizon Europe. And this scheme is dedicated or focused on training doctoral students and postdoctoral fellows. And the key message is training through research. So under the scheme, the European Union is funding research, which then helps training researchers either in the doctoral or at the postdoctoral stage. And Marie Curie scheme in general are open to researchers of all nationalities, of all research disciplines, STEM, social sciences, humanities, you name it, and at all career stages. And the goal is basically to equip researchers with new skills and knowledge in order to enhance their career development and training and in order to support their long-term employability. So basically this scheme is uniquely focused on your training needs in a way, but through research. And one of the key things to know in this regard is that the Marie Curie has the 3E approach to mobility, or basically the 3E approach generally to your training. So internationally, so there is this component that you have to be mobile, so mobility across border from country A to country B. Intersectoral, so exposure to different sectors, which is academic and non-academic sectors. I'll get to that later in my presentation, how this refers to the Marie Curie Postdoctoral Fellowships in particular. And also there's at least they are hoping for people to gain exposure to different disciplines. I understand that the slides will be uploaded later on, and I've included a link to an example here so that you can check for yourselves. And this particular example the European Commission has published was about interdisciplinary project between Egyptology and parasitology, and they were examining mummies. Without further ado, there are two types of Marie Curie Postdoctoral Fellowships. The one which I think is the more relevant for you, but I'm going to present both, is the European Fellowship, which is for 12 to 24 months. And it is open to applicants from any nationality. Going to let this sink in. What exactly do I do in the European Fellowship? Well, you can be located in any country in the world or in a European member state or associated country. And you would have to move to a new member state or a new member state or a country associated to Horizon Europe. Just a quick explanation. I said previously that Horizon Europe was the European Union's flagship program. It is funded basically by EU member states and countries which have chosen to associate to Horizon Europe. So if I say associated countries, it means all the countries who are associated to Horizon Europe and who are basically paying in. So basically, you can come in from any country in the world, move to a host institution, EU member state associated country, and it has a duration of 12 to 24 months. The other scheme, which I will also briefly outline, is the global fellowships. In order to eligible to apply, there are other eligibility criteria, but the main eligibility criteria for this one is you have to be either national or long-term resident from EU member state or associated country. You can have a short think, but basically this is what you need to think about. Am I a national or have I lived for at least 5 years in a member state or associated country? Under this scheme, there's an outgoing phase. So you would be going from a country to from a member state or associated country to a third country for 12 to 24 months. And then you'd have a mandatory return phase of 12 months. And that would, again, either be a new member state or associated country. I hope I'm not going too fast, but I will now briefly outline the eligibility criteria of the fellow. The first thing is you must be in possession of a doctoral degree in order to be eligible to apply to the scheme. Or alternatively, you must have successfully defended your doctoral thesis by the call deadline. The call deadline is the 14th September 22. You must have a maximum of 8 years full-time equivalent research experience by the call deadline. but there are extensions to this criteria such as paternity leave, sick leave, etc. And I understand the slides will be uploaded. And again, I've provided a link for here, so you can click on the link and check out the extension to this criteria. In the interest of time, I don't want to go into too much detail on this. And the last criteria which you need to think about is the Marie Curie is one of the key aspects is mobility. So you cannot have resided or carry out your main activity work in the country of the host institution for European fellowships for more than 12 months in the 3 years immediately before the call deadline. Example, let's assume for the sake of argument, you're now in Malaysia and you want to move to France for your to take up your European fellowship. You cannot have resided in France for more than 12 years in the 3 years immediately before the call deadline of the 14th September 22. Again, if you have any questions about this, always feel free to contact us, feel free to contact your advisors. I'm pretty sure we can get us, we can help you with that. And then I would also want to briefly talk about the eligibility criteria of the host organization for the European fellowship, mainly focused on that. Just very briefly, because there's always some confusion. The beneficiary refers to EU member state or refers to an institution, EU member state or associated country. They are recruiting the postdoctoral fellow. They are hosting the European fellowship. And it could be any legal entity with or within or with outside of academia. So basically, this is the one we're recruiting you, and I think probably Brian and or Marie Curie Fellow will probably give you more details on that. Associated partner is basically for global fellowship, the host of the outgoing phase of the global fellowship. I don't want to talk too much in detail about the global fellowship, but if you're interested, ACRO has held a webinar and I've provided you the link here. But what would be of interest to you for European fellowship is that they can be secondment and placement hosts. And I will quickly just quickly detail secondment and placements because they offer you additional training opportunities and additional mobility opportunities. The non-academic sector is optional, so you don't have to, but if you choose to do a non-academic sector, it will be evaluated. Must be an integral part of the proposal in this case with clear supervisory arrangements. But what is exactly a non-academic sector? Sorry, I have a slide stutter at times. What exactly is this displacement? It is an additional period of up to 6 months at the end of a fellowship. So once you have finished your fellowship, then basically you can ask for another 6 months, and it must be in the non-academic sector only. And the host must be located in either EU member state or Horizon Europe associated country. In the interest of time, I've added you additional information here, and again, the slides will be uploaded so you can have a look. But the only thing I want to say here again, this non-academic placement must have an added value for the project and for your career development. And you must clearly outline this in your proposal. Secondments, again, this is basically, you can at any time in European fellowship, at any time during the fellowship, you can go on a secondment to host organization located anywhere in the world, in any sector, and also split in multiple secondments for up to 1/3 of the duration of the fellowship. And again, this is optional, but if you mention this in your proposal, it will be evaluated, and it must be done with clear supervisory arrangements, integral part of the proposal, and it must really be clearly in line with the project objectives and your training needs. That being said, I just want to very briefly, and we have the time, take this opportunity to just give you some background information, because we get the question a lot about whether the UK is eligible to host researchers, to just very briefly give you one quick overview. You might be aware, you might not be aware, but the UK has negotiated the UK-EU Trade and Cooperation Agreement in September 22 of the EU. And both parties, the EU and UK, have confirmed that it is the UK intention to associate to Horizon Europe, which means that UK entities can participate in projects as if they were already considered an associate partners. In a nutshell, this means that UK-based organizations and researchers can host European fellowships. So we can host you if you choose to come to UK. We can host you on secondments and at the optional placement at the end of the fellowship. And if you have any questions, here's our email address. I understand the slides will be uploaded, so you can have a look at. You can contact us then. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Anne. So we've heard that this is a bottom-up fellowship. It is open to applicants that have a PhD at the time of the deadline, which is the 14th of September. We know that it is entirely up to the applicant to decide on the research topic that they would like to work on. So it is not restricted to the natural sciences, but very much open to the humanities and the social sciences too. We have heard that you must not have more than 8 years of research experience. And maybe you could just elaborate a little bit on that, because we get this question a lot. What is counted as research experience and what is not counted? Are there exceptions? And perhaps maybe how can applicants document if they have gaps in their career so that they come to this particular time?
Okay. So first of all, you must think about it as full-time, 8 years equivalent. So for example, if you work part-time, you must of course calculate it part-time. And just for information, I will probably put this in the slide before I send the slides to Susan again. There's also a calculator on the website of the European Commission, which you can use to assess. But to answer Susan's question now, this means that you must have been employed at a research organization, must have worked in research, either employed or on a scholarship. But if you are, for example, if you've taken sick leave, if you've taken maternity leave, paternity leave, if you've only been associated with a university, but I don't know, you've done teaching, for example, this again will not be considered employed in research. It has to really be employed, what's the word, research activities. Or if you've taken, taken time outside of research and worked in a completely different field. This must be documented, and you must give these documentations to your beneficiary, the one who will be recruiting you. So the host institution in the your member state or associate country. This could be employment contracts, I don't know, paternity. We have seen all kinds of things. So we've seen health certificates, we've seen employment contracts. It really is to your situation. But please be aware that your beneficiary may be audited, and you need to be able to provide him to the institution with all this documentation.
Thank you, Anne. So your best bet is to really keep a close eye on your employment contracts and work with your institutions, the institutions where you have been employed, to make sure that you get the right documentation. And I've heard that a lot. The documentation must be very precise, including the day, the month, and the year, so that the calculation can be done correctly. Now, Anne has already indicated the UK is available to host institutions, to host applicants. And of course, as we've heard, you can pick a host institution in any of the 27 EU member states, and also those countries that are associated with Horizon Europe, which is, for example, Norway or Turkey, for example. In terms of the type of institution, does it have to be a research university, or are there other institutions that can also act as hosts?
It can be either academic or non-academic institution, but just if you can say some more words about this, I would really strongly in your proposal emphasize basically how this project will be handled, how this will contribute to your career opportunities, to your career enhancements, what skills you will learn, what skills you have. So to really make a case not only for the project itself, for the research, but also for you as a researcher and basically as a project. But I think Brian will talk more about this, so I don't want to take away from you, Brian. Apologies.
Okay, thank you. Maybe we have two questions specific to Anne before we move to Brian. There is one question which relates to the mobility rule. So the mobility rule, as you've said, the person must not have had their place of work or place of residence for more than 12 months in the previous 3 years before they apply.
Immediately before the call deadline, yeah. You have to fill call deadline and then work back. Yeah.
Exactly. So maybe I'll just read this out. We have a question here from Noor, and Noor says, I have completed my PhD in 2019 in the UK, but I returned to Malaysia in 2018, and I continue my work here. So the 3 years is counted from the day I returned to Malaysia. Is that correct?
Firstly, can I just say that the day is counted from the call deadlines, you have to think call deadline. What did I do from the counting backwards from the call deadline, what did I do in the 3 years prior? But can I just ask her if she wants to go to UK institution to contact us at Marie Curie at our email address, because we usually prefer to give these in writing and basically think about this and not answer this, you know. But I can put my email address in the chat.
Excellent. I think that's fabulous. Exactly, because this is the great work that the NCPs do. They help you with these details, kind of figuring out your eligibility. And then maybe the next question I'll pass to Brian in a second. So maybe let's invite Brian now to share his screen and to share his presentation. Thank you, Brian.
Thanks very, very much for the nice introduction, Susana. So I will kind of introduce myself first, and kind of through my international research mobility. I studied engineering in Dublin in the 90s and kind of moved to Germany kind of directly after my studies to work in industry at Hewlett-Packard near Stuttgart. After that, after 2 years, I moved to do PhD in Switzerland at the ETH Zurich, and then I moved to do a postdoc in Geneva, also in Switzerland. And that's where my Marie Curie journey began, because I left Geneva to do kind of a Marie Curie Fellowship in Germany at kind of a research institute on kind of Institute for Bioprocessing and Analytical Measurement Techniques, where I worked in microfluidics. I had 2 Marie Curie Fellowships for 5 years, which was possible then and not now. And after that, I became group leader in the same institute. I left kind of that institute to become a project manager of a Marie Curie co-fund at the University of Edinburgh in 2018. And then I returned to Germany to work at the TIB Hanover, which is the German National Technical Library. And another kind of strand of my experience is that I was involved in the Marie Curie Alumni Association, first as chair of the German chapter, and then as chair of the whole association from 2016 to 2018. I'm also a board member of Euroscience and a board member of the Seiling Foundation that does training in transferable skills. But I'm also an evaluator for Marie Curie IF, kind of in Horizon 2020, and also some other calls, including for the European Innovation Council and so on. I think what I would like to talk about today is just some tips about kind of doing the proposal, because for many people, this may be the first long proposal that they've ever done, or kind of a proposal that's kind of longer than a page or two. And in comparison with, say, I don't know, here in Germany, say the Humboldt Foundation proposal is a lot simpler. I think that the Marie Curie proposal is a Horizon Europe proposal, and it has a lot of technical details and policy inputs from the Commission and kind of things you have to fulfill in order to get. And because it's so competitive, that if you don't kind of cover all of the angles, that it becomes quite difficult to get. I think firstly, you should give yourself a lot of time to write a proposal, and you can submit as often as you like. It's the last submitted version that's counted. So don't wait until the very last minute to make your first submission. Do it as early as possible so that if there's any kind of boxes that need to be ticked, you don't find out at the very end that you've sorted these problems out. And then if you find something that you need to change in your main submission, that you can always upload a new PDF. That you should read the call text and the guide for applicants very carefully, because the details within these documents matter a lot for writing this proposal. That this fellowship has it's kind of usually focused on the person that will be the fellow, and kind of that on your story, and you need to show that you're worth investing in and that your relationship with the supervisor is a real relationship and kind of delivers value for both you and kind of the team that you will be working in. And kind of it's usually focused on these relationships and kind of how you can develop yourself, kind of your career, your skills, and kind of how by doing this that will deliver great research. Ask a lot of people for feedback on the proposal. Your supervisor, who you're going to be working with, has a huge input to the proposal as well, because it's about, very often it's an interdisciplinary project, and you have your own background, and that's what you're bringing, and then your supervisor has another research focus. And when you bring these two kind of types of research together, you get a huge added value. And I think this means that as a reviewer, if you read the proposal where you know that the prospective fellow understands their own research but doesn't understand the research of the lab they're moving into, this can cause difficulties of understanding. And so I think to work with the PI that you will be working with at the time of submission really helps to make this work. I think I would also recommend you, if you could possibly get a small grant to work in that lab for 3 months or 4 months or 5 months, that's a huge help, and it also helps the proposal. And there are kind of, I don't know, from the German Academic Transfer Agency or from other kind of agencies, that there are kind of, it's not that difficult to get small grants. The big grants are difficult, like this one, but the small ones are normally easy, but it helps to write the proposal a lot. You should ask people with less direct experience of the research topic, not the experts, the people who have good general knowledge, so that they may pick up on things that the evaluators may have difficulty understanding, because generally the evaluators have good general knowledge, but they won't know the specifics of your research topic. So you have to make that very clear why it's important, and so that they can understand it. The EU grant support offices are hugely helpful for these sort of proposals, because if they can understand Marie Curie and have systems set up to support Marie Curie proposals, this will help you a lot, particularly on many of the details to do with public engagement or and so on, or kind of career development. If there are resources within your institution to help your proposal, they will know about them and will make those available to you to include in your proposal. First, a little bit about the work of an evaluator for the EU. If you submit a proposal within the same system, there is a link to a link that allows you to upload your CV and to basically to advertise yourself as a potential evaluator. And many people do this because they submit proposals, they also know that this exists, and it's well worth doing. I talked with Susana. She said that even if you're not based in Europe, you can also advertise yourself as a potential evaluator. There's no better way to understand how proposals are evaluated than to do the job yourself. So that as part of the evaluation process, you get told probably about 2 or 3 months before the end of the call that the commission would like to hire you to be an evaluator, and they'd hire you for a particular kind of topic, whether that's kind of life sciences. It's a relatively general for your panel, and kind of this is very general. And then once you get to the call deadline, very, very quickly you're asked to sign a contract, and then very quickly you're told there are 8 proposals that we would like you to evaluate. You have very little choice about this, because the time frame for doing all of these evaluations is very tight, and that the commission would like you to accept all of them. And this means that you will have, in a relatively short time, quite a lot of work to do, and mostly in your spare time. And just to give you an idea of kind of how it's done, you have first 3 experts are chosen to write individual evaluation reports. They do this individually and submit them, and then a rapporteur is chosen from among these 3, and the rapporteur writes a kind of a report that summarizes all three evaluators together, and this is agreed on. Any differences are ironed out and eliminated, and so that we have a coherent kind of evaluation that is then forwarded to with a mark so that with an evaluation, so that it's forwarded on to the ESR phase, where which I was not involved in, but then there are a number of quality control steps to make sure that the right proposals are chosen, that the evaluators have done their job well. So there is a lot of checks and balances within the system, and I think that the research executive agency do a lot of work to get this done within the time frame that they've got available. It's quite impressive. I think another point is that there is a manual, a step-by-step manual for evaluators. I include the link here, and this is important to understand how the evaluator works if you want to have a look at that. It's from 2018, which is Horizon 2020. It's slightly different now, but I think much of the processes are exactly the same. And this is, I won't go through all of the points on this slide, but it shows the assessment grid from the evaluator's manual. And it basically goes through a lot of the points that are in the guide for applicants and are in the template for writing the proposal. And it kind of asks, are the state-of-the-art specific objectives and an overview of the action provided and relevant? And so this is, to some extent, is a tick box. It's kind of where you can rate the proposal, whether it really does this very well or not. And so for all of these points, that we will go through in a little bit more detail of the next while, the evaluators are asked very specifically to rate the proposals based on these criteria. So these are the main evaluation criteria as described by the Commission. You've got excellence, 50%, impact, 30%, and quality and efficiency of the implementation, which is 20%. And you may think that the 20%, this is, people can do very well on the first two and not so well on the 20%, and this can really harm your proposal if you misunderstand the assessment of risk, even though it can be very simple procedure, and it's rarely very critical or using a lot of excellence to do this assessment of risk. But if you misunderstand it or don't do it, it will reflect badly on your proposal and may make a big difference at the end. So I think here that the excellence is about kind of the research project and kind of the understanding that this is kind of a research project of high quality and interest, and that it goes beyond the state of the art. So you describe the state of the art and you say kind of how this proposal goes beyond the state of the art. This is very typical of a research proposal. Then you describe your methodology, including interdisciplinary approaches. And this is kind of how you will do this work, how you will frame it, kind of what materials you will use to do it, and what you will have access to. Also kind of here, I will mention very briefly gender dimension. Gender dimension is not gender equality. Gender dimension is if your research has any impact on gender differently, and if it has impact on people, it will have gender dimension. If you have different genders of animals in life sciences, it can make a difference. And very often previously in research, if you do say kind of the most obvious one is that if you had crash test dummies that were modeled on men, this had poorer outcomes for women when vehicles crashed. And so this is kind of something that is still true today, even though we've known this for maybe 15, 20 years, that it's an issue, that it's very difficult for research and innovation to change such outcomes. And so I think if you have kind of medical experiments, very often there is a gender dimension. Quality of the supervision, training, and quality of open science practices, that within European Commission projects, there is a very clear open science guidance and kind of requirement for publishing open access and so on, and open data. So you can check with your research support office in your host institution about this for further information. The quality of the supervision, training, and two-way transfer of knowledge. This is hugely important. Kind of the supervision is kind of how your supervisor and the institution will ensure that you're supervised, that you will have regular meetings, that you will be part of the team, that you will kind of present in the, kind of institute seminars, all of this. Your training, you have to show that your training is suited for developing your career and kind of developing your skills. So, and then there's a two-way transfer of knowledge. You will bring a lot with you and you will gain a lot from, and you have to demonstrate this two-way transfer of knowledge. And kind of that maybe you will supervise kind of master's students, or you will, if you have to show very, very clear ways that you will transfer knowledge and that you will gain knowledge with very, and kind of you have to show it's not something that you can bluff. You have to show that you have thought about it and that you have set it up. The quality and appropriateness of the researcher's professional experience, competences, and skills. This is basically your CV, but you have to show that you are at a stage where you can take a step to the next level, from being PhD student to postdoc, or to being postdoc in your country, to being kind of having more international experience. The impact is the next section. It's 30%, and this is the impact on your career and employability. And so you are at the very center of this, and your skills development. So you will have to basically showing, based on what you set up in the last excellence section, then you will show that it will deliver for your career going forward in the future. That's the suitability and quality of the measures to maximize expected outcomes and impacts as set out in the dissemination and exploitation plan, including communication activities. And this is communication of all types, to your scientific peers, to your peers in kind of policy making, in industry, in kind of roles outside of academia that may have interests in your research, and communication to the general public, kind of science communication, public engagement. And this is quite important, and it has to be kind of, you can, probably your institution has things that you can build in, but you will have to do some thinking, who is interested in my research, and kind of, and be specific about people who you will talk to, organizations, people, and companies, and so on. The magnitude and importance of the project's contribution to the expected scientific and societal and economic impacts. So this is kind of, if your project has kind of impact for society, you should be very clear where you expect this to happen. And this can be economic, it can be societal impact, and kind of, so this is very, very, and for many projects, I think this is very, very well worked out. The quality and the efficiency of the implementation is all about project planning, assessment of risks, and kind of forming your work packages. Don't overload yourself. It shouldn't be too little, it shouldn't be too much, because if it's too much, if it's enough work for a European Research Council grant, then I think that this is not good, because it will not be done within 2 years. So you have to think about this a lot. The quality and capacity of the host institution and participating, and kind of, you will have to show that your host will support you. I will go through this, I think these 3 slides very quickly. These are kind of sample evaluator comments. There's a link here, there's a file full of comments. And I just picked out and highlighted some of the comments as kind of clearly, well described is good, clearly demonstrated is good, high quality, top-level scientific manager, this description of the manager, ideal to guarantee the integration of the researcher. Most of these are all good, and a lot of it is about clarity. And kind of what's bad is not sufficiently demonstrated, unclear and insufficiently substantiated. It's not, there's no, it's kind of, it says it will do it, but there's no details. Not sufficiently integrated, not clear, or not sufficiently discussed, not clear, not clearly elaborated. And I think it's the same for impact. no clear strategy, not sufficiently considered. And if something is good, it's convincingly argued, properly conceived, carefully and appropriately managed. It's not, sometimes it's not being the best of the best, sometimes it's about being good enough. And in this proposal, you have to be good enough that it convinces somebody, and that it's clear, and kind of that the reviewer understands. And I think for the planning and implementation, it's exactly the same, well designed, clearly defined. It's not kind of, this is the best of the best all the time. It's kind of, it's enough. And so I think firstly, lastly, the evaluators don't have a lot of time. They do 4 hours work in each project, and they do about 5 to 15 proposals within 3 to 4 weeks. So if it's difficult for them and it's unclear, that it kind of takes their time more than they have allotted, and that they generally mark down when they don't understand something well. So they're not always the experts. They may have general knowledge, so you should really kind of make things as clear as possible for somebody who is from your field but may not understand your research fully. So I think I have more kind of tips on kind of how to make it easy for the evaluators that you can go through when I give you the slides afterwards. Kind of tips for clear and concise writing, that most of the evaluators are not native English speakers. So this means that you should be very clear about meaning. I think that if you have a couple of spelling mistakes, they probably won't care. But if they don't understand something, this is bad, because it means that they get stuck reading it. And so you should try to make everything as clear as possible, even so, and kind of not overly complex. You're not there to impress them, you're there to communicate. And so I will leave it at that, and kind of I look forward to your questions, and I look forward to hearing from Jia Hoong later afterwards.
Thank you so much, Brian. Very precise as always, and as we've said, you will receive the slides afterwards and also the recording, so you have enough time to kind of look at it in detail. And Brian has been very generous with giving you a lot of feedback already. Now, as he said already, you will receive a very detailed report from the evaluator on your proposal. So even if you're not successful, and be interesting to hear from Jia Hoong in a minute, how often he applied. It's not uncommon not to be successful the first time round, but you receive so much detailed feedback on your application that this is really a treasure trove for the application next year. Brian, there's just a couple of questions while we have you here on the supervision. Now, that of course is like a central element. Of course, everybody needs to have a good idea. Everybody needs to know what they want to research on, but finding the supervisor, that's always a little bit tricky. And so the question is, the first one is, we get this a lot, does it have to be a very high profile person? Does it have to be an institution that's very highly ranked? Or what makes a good match?
It doesn't have to be an institution that's highly ranked. I think that many of the highly ranked institutions get these fellowships more because they give better support. So I think that if you go to a more highly ranked institution, the research support office may be much better in that institution. And I think from the point of view of the CV, I think even an inexperienced supervisor has something that you can kind of look at. I mean, they wouldn't be in the position to be a junior research group leader, or if you don't need to win the Nobel Prize. You just need to have an angle that says that this research is interesting, that this person is an expert, that they have served on, everybody has a scientific CV. And so I think it's a lot of the time you have to describe it. And sometimes if you have the big name Nobel Prize winner, that's great, but they will have very little time to supervise you. So I think and they will have very little time to help you write the proposal. So I think you have to look at it in a more balanced way. It has to be right for you. And if it's right for you, then it will be convincing for the evaluators, and if the project makes sense. And I think even young researchers, even young group leaders have sometimes have great ideas. So, and I think that sometimes the old, and it's not always, kind of sometimes the old kind of experienced supervisors have kind of more stale ideas. So I think in some, you have to really find something where it actually makes sense, the transfer of knowledge between you and the supervisor.
Yes, thank you. So it has to make sense, and you have to be able to bring across that benefit in the proposal. So you need to be able to write why this is a good team and what each member of that team benefits. There is a question from Sandakuma Sampat. He is asking how many supervisors or host institutions can be added. I think his scenario is he has offers from 2 professors from 2 different universities. Can they both be involved in his fellowship?
You can only have one beneficiary, as in that's the institution that will pay your wages, but you can set up a kind of a secondment to another institution should you have need to go to that institution to do particular measurements, and because the collaboration makes sense. So I think generally that's the way that it can be done. If you can do a secondment during your fellowship to the other lab. And but I think you can't have two institutions acting as your main supervisor. So basically, somebody, you sign a contract with one of the institutions, but you can continue kind of research collaboration with somebody else while you're doing the fellowship. There's no limit there, and kind of have your kind of travel to that institution paid for as part of the grant from the kind of the research budget.
Thank you. And just very quickly, the secondment can be in the same country. It cannot be in the same institution, but it can be in the same country.
I think within the same institution, you could say it was some sort of co-supervision. And kind of to say that I think it's going back to the last question. Very often, if you have a very inexperienced supervisor, that some senior academic from the institution is added as a co-supervisor. So I think you can set that up, and you can name the team members, and you have one supervisor, but there can be many team members kind of involved in working in the project.
Thank you so much, Brian. Now we have questions coming in, but I think we will first hear from our fellow, Ong Jia Hoong, who is currently at Reading University. Now I invite Jia Hoong now to share his screen and to share a little bit about his experience as an MSCA Fellow.
Hello, so you can see my slides okay, right, everyone? Yeah.
Yes, we can.
Great. Well, thank you for the invitation to speak at this panel. I feel a certain kind of kinship with a lot of the attendees because I'm actually Malaysian. So hello, everyone. But I would like to share my personal experience with the MSCA. So basically from my journey from PhD to MSCA, I got my PhD in 2016 in Sydney in Australia. And then I moved to Singapore to do my research fellowship. That was or postdoc, they call it research fellow here in Singapore. And then to University of Reading, where I worked as another postdoc. And it was during this time when I applied for MSCA in 2019. And that was a very weird time as well because it was during Brexit. And so it was uncertain, blah, blah, blah. But it was awarded in the end. So I was very lucky with that. But I didn't start my MSCA until 2021, so which is ongoing at the moment. And basically what I want to highlight here is that I guess I followed a very linear trajectory for a lot of PhD holders that, you do one postdoc to another, hoping that you might get a grant on your own one day. And in my case, I was very lucky and I did. I don't think I need to convince you why you need to apply for an MSCA because I think Anne and Brian did a really good job. But from my personal perspective, there's 4, I guess, top reasons why you should apply for an MSCA. In order of importance, basically, the first is that you get the freedom to work on your own project. And this is really rare for if you have finished your PhD, if you're doing a postdoc for someone, you're basically working on the PI's project. But in this case, this is your own project, so your own baby. And that's, I think, a really rare experience. one of the things that I really like about the MSCA Fellowship is that it is focused on training and career development. As you heard from Brian earlier, one of the things that they really want to see is how this project that you propose will help you gain skills to become a better researcher or for your career opportunities in the future. So the focus is on training and career development. So they want to invest in you. So you have to show why that is the case, why you're worth investing, basically. I'm going to get in trouble for saying this, but the MSCA has very generous funding. So as I was saying earlier, I did work as a postdoc in the UK. So I was getting UK salary postdoc. And then, I was awarded the MSCA, and I was awarded the MSCA. So it was a very generous funding. And finally, there's very minimal paperwork, which is very rare if you're applying for grants. At least in my case, because MSCA is only for 2 years, you're given a grant or you're given the fellowship. You don't really have to do any paperwork until the end of the 2 years, where you basically write up a report. Whereas for most other grants or bigger grants, you will have to write an interim report from time to time and fix your budget. Whereas with MSCA, they trust that you'll be, doing the training and the fellowship that you're supposed to be doing. So minimal paperwork, which is excellent. I am just going to go through some of my personal tips, and a lot of it you will have heard from Anne and Brian earlier. But basically, the science bit of the excellence part of the application should be sound and innovative. And I think that if you're thinking of applying for it, chances are your project will be quite excellent already. But here are some things that might help you stand out, which I've sort of like picked up from here and there when I was researching how to apply for this. The first is start early. And I don't mean in terms of writing early. I mean, in terms of thinking about who do you want to, where do you want to work at? You don't want to pick somewhere where it's just, you're picking it because it's prestigious. You want to make sure that there's a good fit, have a gauge, see if they're willing to provide the kind of support, especially for us early career researchers. You want to make sure that they are supportive of ECR researchers generally. Speaking of, you want to think about the host institute and how well you might fit in. The idea of two-way transfer is heavily emphasized in the application. So this is the question of what can you bring to the host and what can the host give you in return? And so how is this going to help with your training and your development? And then why this particular host? And obviously this aspect will be relevant to the implementation bit of the application. So why this particular institute? Do they have the appropriate infrastructure to support the research that you want to do? So just to give, put into context, so I've shown you this before. My current project is on emotion processing among autistic and neurotypical individuals. And I'm looking at this using a mechanism called statistical learning. You don't really need to know about it, it's really boring. But basically I investigate this using behavioral and neural methods. And what I've color-coded here in red are aspects that my hosts or the supervisors that I'm working with are really good at. And what is in blue is what I'm really good at. So I'm at the School of Psychology and Clinical Language Sciences within the University of Reading. And what's really cool is that within the school, we also have a Center for Autism, which we have world-leading researchers doing autism research. So this is the bit that will cover the autism bit of my project. And there's also a center within the school called the Center for Integrative Neuroscience and Neurodynamics, which basically is a multimodal imaging center. So they have MRI, EEG, TMS, all kind of fun stuff. And so that's the bit that will cover the neural aspects of my project. So when I received the evaluation report for my application, one of the things that they really liked is that they saw that my project and the host is a really, really good fit. and they can see how concrete that transfer will be. So I think in my case, the good fit between my project and the host really put me in a really good advantage in terms of getting the award. Finally, if you can, try to read previous successful applications. A lot of the host institutes that you might want to work at, they may have a successful proposal library. And what I mean by that is that basically these are either by the library itself or from the research office, they would host a lot of applications that have gone through their office or the university. And at least in my case, I did contact the Successful Proposal Library at Reading when I was applying for this. We had, I guess over the course of the year, a few years, there were a few successful MSCA Fellows from the University of Reading, although none of them from psychology. So I was reading applications in archaeology, meteorology, and it was fine because I needed to have a look at what is a good application, right? So it's not so much about the science, but what does a good application look like? So if possible, I would highly recommend doing this. And Brian has already said this, but basically have others read and comment in your application. I know it sounds really daunting, but it is really helpful. So in my case, I had two professors who are basically part of a research committee read my application. They were not, I guess, experts in emotion processing or autism or statistical learning or anything like that, but they were professors within psychology, and they provided really good feedback just to, help clear things up a little bit, especially because your evaluator is likely to be not someone who is a direct expert in that tiny niche area that you're researching on. But yeah, so that's basically all the tips that I have. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you so much, Jia Hoong. And I think as we can see as well, is that the community of the Marie Curie Fellows is extremely generous in sharing their advice and really making sure that as many of their peers can also benefit from this fellowship. So very great advice. Start early. It's a great time now. The call only opened and you have pretty much 5 months to get this done. From what I understand, Jia Hoong, really working with your potential supervisor is very important. So you must not wait for them to give you instructions. You must be proactive. You must seek, their feedback, and you must, as you have demonstrated, you must do your research. You really have to read around and see how it fits, and then not be too shy to ask for help from others. So thank you so much. And I think what you've said, asking for access to previous proposals is very important. You can Google them. I mean, there's lots of fellows that put them online, but as you said, each institution is likely going to have their own internal library. Now,
yeah, and sorry, just one more thing. I think depending on which institute that you're going to apply for, a lot of them do have a research office that do kind of support specific grant applications. So at least in my case, there was someone from the research office that does a lot of EU grants. So, she was very helpful in terms of getting my applications together, providing me with a lot of resources like, oh, here's a successful one. Yes, it's in archaeology about bone digging or whatever, but, might be relevant. So it was very helpful actually. So definitely get in touch with those support staff.
Thank you so much. Now, we have quite a few questions. I think we'll have 5 more minutes before everybody has to leave. And Anne and Brian have already put in the chat. Please keep an eye on that. They've added a lot of resources. Anne has already provided information on how to become an evaluator. She's added the official call details on the tender and funding portal. And she's also added some information on proposal writing workshops that were carried out by the UK Research Office. Now, we have a few questions. Jia Hoong, here's one for you. You, of course, were already in the UK when you applied, but there's a question here from a fellow Malaysian, Yvonne Ang, she's asking, what is your personal advice for Malaysians who are based in Malaysia? How should they go about contacting potential hosts in the UK or elsewhere in Europe?
Okay. So, yeah, yes, I wasn't already in the UK when I applied for my fellowship, but I had no connection with my supervisor before applying for it. So I basically applied to be a postdoc under her position. And then we talked about it. And then she was like, I think it's a good idea for you to apply for this, and so on and so forth. So I think I would like to think that a lot of researchers, especially professors generally, are more than happy to hear from anyone, especially early career researchers or budding early career researchers, in terms of forming a collaboration. So don't be shy, like honestly, send them an email, or more often than not, Twitter is also a good place now. Sometimes when I read a paper that I really like, I try to find the first author or the senior author on Twitter, and I just send them a DM, or as the kids say, slide into their DM, and just say thank you, or like just appreciate that. Oh, this is a really cool paper that you wrote. Or if you're if you have something in mind, you could potentially even say like, is this something that we could collaborate? I have this idea. Can we discuss via Zoom, etc.? So it's really about putting yourself out there. And like I say, more often, I have never received like a negative response every time I make a contact with a professor. So you have nothing to lose. I would say just go for it.
Yes, thank you so much. I think it's good advice. You have to be proactive. Maybe to add, you also have to maybe keep in mind that these are busy people. So try to already present to them in a very short, condensed form what it is that you're proposing to do, so that they can immediately see, aha, this is how this is relevant to me, how this relates to my own research, and this is why this person would be a benefit to my own research team. So I think this is great advice from Jia Hoong. Now we have a couple more questions here. Brian, you were talking earlier about the gender aspect. That's become very important. Now we have a question here from someone who says, I deal with rocks and sediments. How is gender relevant to me? What would be your advice for that person?
I think there is very little chance that the evaluator will come up with the idea that if you're dealing with rocks and sediments, that there is a gender dimension. I think that can only happen if the research has some impact on human beings or kind of gender animals, or and if there is no kind of human aspect to it, I think that the gender dimension can be, it doesn't have to be dealt with. But I think that, and I think it's only if you have a gender dimension that you have ignored that you can have a kind of a negative impact of not dealing with the gender dimension. But I think in this case, if it's pure mathematics or that there will not be a gender dimension for an impact on kind of people going forward. So I think there's no need to deal with gender dimension if it's not relevant.
Okay, I think Anne is raising a hand. I just wanted to add to this, just to say what we usually advise applicants. I'm sorry, Brian, it's just that we usually say, like Brian said, it doesn't have a gender dimension, but we want them to flag this in the proposal, not just ignore it by saying, look, we don't have a gender dimension because we don't deal with rocks. You can think about other things like we want to disseminate it to specific, girls groups, or, have a gender component there, but just don't leave it out. You don't have to, like I said, like Brian was right, but just don't leave it out. Mention it that you at least thought about it.
You can show that if you're dealing with kind of public engagement or in some other aspect of your activities, you can include a gender element. So I think this is not is something that, of course, kind of there's no direct research impact for it, but I think this doesn't mean that you don't have to. And if by stating clearly that there is no gender dimension, it shows that you have considered the gender dimension.
Thank you. And there's a question from Arini Utami. Maybe I'll refer this first to Jia Hoong and then to Arne. This person says, I saw patent in the sample of an evaluator's comment Now, since social science research may not have or may not result in patents, would that put my proposal at risk of being successful? Maybe, Jia Hoong, did you have any patents when you applied for your fellowship?
No, but so I did apply under social sciences, but we do not envisage any patents. But having said that, we actually wrote explicitly that. We said that our output unlikely directly will contribute to any patents. However, some might use our data to develop. So in our case, it's on potentially having a diagnostic tool for autism, potentially. And I mean, this could be like many years down the line, but we explicitly considered that. We say like, from this research, unlikely there will be any patents. However, future users may exploit this for this purpose and so on and so forth. So I think it's the explicit consideration that whether this is the case or not. But I don't think that affected any chances, I don't think. I hope not.
Well, obviously it didn't. Thank you, Jia Hoong. So as you said, you also must be able to kind of go beyond, you know, share a little bit of the vision, what's going to come out of this. Maybe a related question, which people always ask, do you need to have a certain number of publications to be successful? And do these have to be publications in very high profile journals? What is your advice here?
Yeah. I'm also happy for Brian to answer this, but basically what we usually say is the publications, everything basically has to be suited to your project, to what you're proposing. So for example, if you have, let's say, specific, there's not a number of publications you must have. There's not, you know, a number of high-ranking journal publications, but you must have. But you must be saying, look, I am this researcher, I have this experience as evidenced by these publications, present basically who you are and how basically the project will, you know, contribute to your career development, how basically will learn new skills, what you envision, these kinds of things. But no, you don't need to have a certain number of publications. Maybe Brian, because if you want to.
But I think there is no guidance that the kind of researcher has to have a certain number of publications. I think the publications do show that the researcher can work and produce scientific knowledge or present scientific knowledge, but I don't think it means that. I think that the reviewers tend not to discuss the publications. I think it's and that's the career stage of the applicant. I mean, it's just a big range between fresh PhD graduates to people with 7-8 years experience, plus maybe career breaks in between. So I think this is a big, and so that there's no one size fits all, that the researcher has to have 10 publications in Nature or something. And there's none of this discussion about journal impact factor or anything like this, but you have to show that you can do scientific work, and that you can present your work, whether it's at conferences or in papers, all the sort of stuff that you will be doing during the fellowship, and that you have worked scientifically during your career so far. But there's no discussion of how many papers somebody has published.
Thank you, Brian. There's another question for you from Rina Fadila Ismail, and she said, what is your view on the resubmission of the last proposal with the score of 80?
I think I saw this comment. I think that 80 isn't such a bad mark. It's 4 out of 5. And it means that if you improve each one of the kind of excellence, impact, and kind of implementation by half a mark, which isn't much, you're up to 90 already. So I think that, and kind of 80, if you have done very well in some of the headings and less well in the others, maybe you can improve very easily. And kind of, so this is something that you should take. And it's also, I've heard from numerous people where they've submitted one year and then submitted the next year and got different marks. So I think you can have luck with the evaluators, and kind of if you find one evaluator who supports you very much and they happen to be the rapporteur for the consensus report, I think this can this can be very useful. So I think some people sometimes I think that 80 is quite a good mark, actually. I mean, it's not close to getting it, but it's not bad. It's a good research proposal.
So it's just for you an encouragement to just give it your best and get it up to 99 in this year.
The report is feedback on what is missing, and so if you read it, you will get different evaluators the second time round. So they may have different issues, but I think it is feedback to what can be improved.
Now we have time for maybe one more question, and I'll ask this to all of you. Maybe I'll ask Jia Hoong first. It's the issue of open science, which is very important as well in your proposal. Jia Hoong, how did you cover this whole issue of open science, which in Southeast Asia is maybe a little bit less developed than it is in Europe? How did you deal with this in your proposal?
So in a way, I didn't really have to deal with it because the university where I'm at Reading, we have a very open data, open access culture. So a lot of our publications do end up going to the library, essentially, that will host the PDFs, so others can just others could just find it. So in a way, for me, that part of the application was very easy because we already have that culture. So I can simply state that we have the infrastructure in the library that would host these repositories of these publications and data sets. So, and it is, you're not required to, but most people do and are encouraged to do so. But I do understand that some institutes may not have the infrastructure ready. However, there are a lot of ways to get around it, even as a personal researcher. So for example, there are, if you build a Google site, you can host your PDFs there. If you have ResearchGate, you can put the PDFs there, even if it's a preprint, or even on OSF, which is the Open Science Framework. So this is just a web, I guess, like a hosting site for you to put your data, your publications, anything that can go on it. So there are ways to get around it, even if your institute doesn't have the infrastructure for it. But I think chances are your host institute will.
But also on Zenodo, which is supported by OpenAir, which is an EU project, I think that you can post a lot of documents and data on Zenodo, and it's quite useful and easy to do. So I think you just have to, if there are commercial, I mean, we talked about patenting before. If there are commercial impacts that you have to discuss this, but I think that's also part of the proposal, that you will get support from the institution about patenting and what can be open and what not. So that I think this can be discussed with the institution. I mean, this is something you have to have clarity yourself, but you have to discuss this with the institution.
Well, that just leaves me to thank all of you. Thank you for our participants for the questions. You will receive the slides, you will receive the recordings, and our guests were already so kind to share also their contact details. Wonderful also to have a Malaysian fellow here. We have a growing number of Malaysians. I think we had a 6, I think, in the previous call. So it's really, really great to see how more and more Southeast Asians are making use of this fellowship. Brian, Anne, fabulous as always to have you on board. Really, really appreciate your support. I've taken down the details of everyone who wants to join us to the matchmaking session, which we're organizing on the 24th, the 25th, and the 30th. And the UK will be there introducing their hosting office as well. But whenever you have a question, please get back to us, asean@euraccess.net, and we can connect you with our colleagues in the UK, elsewhere in Europe. And we hope that you will all be successful in this round of the calls. With this, thank you so much, everyone, and see you soon. Thank you and goodbye.